Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is FixerMed. Welcome back to my high-yield immunology review series for the USMLE Step 1 NBME CBSE and NBME CAS examinations. This will be part 6 of my multi-part video series covering the entire discipline of immunology in a high-yield but comprehensive manner. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on today's content. I'd like to open up starting the lecture off talking about T-cell migration in the thymus. T cells enter the thymic cortex as CD4 and CD8 negative or minus. Within the cortex, they differentiate into CD4 plus and CD8 plus T cells through positive selection, where only those capable of binding self-MHC antigens survive. Let's go ahead and move on to the next concept. I'd like to talk about the maturation and selection process. Transitioning to the thymic medulla, T cells lose either CD4 or CD8. Negative selection occurs in the medulla, eliminating T cell binding excessively to self-MHC antigens to prevent autoimmunity. Moving on. T cell functions beyond the thymus. CD8 plus T cells migrate to lymph nodes, becoming cytotoxic T cells targeting MHC1 on nucleated cells. CD4 plus T cells leave for lymph nodes, transforming into helper T cells, known as Th cells, and further differentiate into various subtypes, engaging MHC2 on antigen-presenting cells. Alright, so now that we have a brief overview of content, let's go ahead and get to the questions. So which of the following best describes the initial state of T cells upon entering the thymic cortex? Alright, I think I gave you guys enough time. If you need more time, please feel free to pause the video. Otherwise, moving on now. When T cells migrate into the thymic cortex, they are initially devoid of both CD4 and CD8 surface markers. This stage marks the early differentiation process within the thymus. Therefore, the correct answer is CD4 minus and CD8 minus, also known as CD4 negative, CD8 negative. Moving on, let's go ahead and see why the other answer choices are incorrect. CD4 and CD8 positive are incorrect because T cells do not express both CD4 and CD8 markers upon entry into the thymic cortex. CD4 plus negative and CD8 plus positive is incorrect as it represents an inaccurate depiction of T cell phenotypes during initial migration into the thymic cortex. CD4 plus positive and CD8 minus negative is incorrect because T cells do not acquire CD4 positivity until later stages of differentiation within the thymus. CD4 minus positive and CD8 plus negative is incorrect because T cells are neither CD4 nor CD8 positive upon initial migration into the thymic cortex. CD4 plus positive and CD8 plus negative is incorrect because T cells do not express both CD4 and CD8 markers in the thymic cortex. Rather, they are initially negative for both markers. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. During which stage of T cell maturation does negative selection primarily occur in the thymus? Alright, I think I gave you guys enough time here. If you need more time, please feel free to pause the video. Otherwise, moving on now. Negative selection primarily occurs during the transition of T cells from the thymic cortex to the thymic medulla, where T cells lose either the CD4 or CD8 marker based on their affinity to self-MHC antigens. This process eliminates T cells with high affinity to self-antigens, reducing their risk of autoimmunity. Therefore, the correct answer is D, loss of either CD4 or CD8 markers in the thymic medulla. Let's go ahead and look at why the other answer choices are incorrect. Transition from CD4 minus and CD8 minus negative to CD4 plus and CD8 plus positive is incorrect because positive selection, not negative selection, occurs during the stage. Migration from the thymic cortex to the thymic medulla is incorrect as negative selection occurs primarily within the thymic medulla, not during migration. Differentiation into cytotoxic T cells and helper T cells is incorrect because negative selection is a process of eliminating autoreactive T cells, not differentiation into specific T cell subsets. Binding of T cells to self-MHC antigens in the lymph nodes is incorrect because negative selection occurs within the thymus, not in the lymph nodes. Initial entry of T cells into the thymic cortex is incorrect as negative selection occurs at later stages of T cell maturation within the thymic medulla. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Which of the following best describes the fate of CD4 plus T cells after leaving the thymic medulla? Alright, I think I gave you guys enough time there. If you need more time, please feel free to pause the video. Otherwise, moving on now. After leaving the thymic medulla, CD4 plus T cells migrate to the lymph nodes where they undergo further differentiation into helper T cells. These helper T cells play crucial roles in orchestrating immune responses by interacting with antigen-presenting cells and activating other immune cells. Therefore, the correct answer is D. They transform into helper T cells in the lymph nodes. Let's go ahead and see why the other answer choices are incorrect. A. They differentiate into cytotoxic T cells in the lymph nodes is incorrect because CD4 plus T cells do not differentiate into cytotoxic T cells. Instead, they differentiate into helper T cells. B. They undergo negative selection in the lymph nodes is incorrect as negative selection primarily occurs in the thymus, not in the lymph nodes. C. They become regulatory T cells in the thymic cortex is incorrect because regulatory T cells, Tregs, typically develop in the thymus, not in the thymic cortex, and they primarily function to suppress immune responses. E. They lose CD4 marker and become CD8 plus T cells is incorrect because CD4 plus T cells do not convert into CD8 plus T cells. They retain their CD4 marker and differentiate into helper T cells. F. They bind to self-MHC antigens in the thymic cortex is incorrect because after leaving the thymus, CD4 plus T cells migrate to the lymph nodes where they interact with antigen-presenting cells via their T cell receptors, not in the thymic cortex. Guys, that will do it all for the lecture today. Hope this helped you out. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If you enjoy this type of videos, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. Otherwise, this is FixerMed signing off. Be sure to have a great day. Goodbye and good luck studying.